Take a brief moment and think back to your preschool days. Back then, what was the worst insult you could possibly confer on somebody? Something that was guaranteed to bring another kid's self-esteem come crashing down. There's no single answer to this question, but there is this one uncomfortable word that I think most of us can agree on as the most destructive label somebody could attach to you in those days. The word is crybaby. We all knew the crybabies, fragile little folks with tear-stained faces, socially marginalized from the rest of us self-respecting kids, and always having trouble making friends. Anything that anyone said seemed to hurt them. Being an innately gentle child, raised by very gentle people, my heart naturally went out to these kids whenever people made fun of them. But I knew I wasn't supposed to feel sorry for them, because nobody likes a crybaby. It's practically written in the charters of school life. Their sentiments were beyond common human understanding, and if you wanted to maintain your social image, you could not be friends with them. That was the norm, and so I went with it. But in spite of all this, I knew that I shared something with them on a much deeper level. I'd been a sensitive kid since the start, and people just seemed to notice that about me. All the while in school, I was afraid that somebody would discover this fact and find out that I was one of them. Are you one of those people who are easily affected by things happening around you and just can't help it? Do you try your hardest to suppress the tears when they well up, only to have them horrifically find their way out again? I feel you. Here's a secret. It doesn't take much to get me to tear up. Up until very recently, any embarrassing social situation or any words from others that pointed out my mistakes, those were enough to do the job. And in every situation where I gave in to emotion, I could feel myself shrinking in the eyes of my peers. I'm here today to see if I can turn the tables, to throw some light on why it is perfectly acceptable to embrace the sensitive part of yourself, and why everyone should do so to some degree, because sensitivity can help unlock aspects of your character that you never knew were there. Most importantly, I want to point out to fellow sensitive people why the world needs you. It just doesn't know it yet. Before we go ahead with this topic, I would like to set the record straight about this crucial quality called sensitivity that's so often perceived as a bad thing. First off, when we look at the facts, you could say that sensitivity is simply an ability to perceive sensory input to a deeper degree than other people. And this could be any input at all. Grief, fear, happiness, and even physical pain are all felt very intensely by these people. The first thing you need to understand about highly sensitive people is that this quality of theirs is innate, and there is nothing wrong with them. Being highly sensitive does not equal being emotionally unstable. The trait of being highly sensitive is actually quite common, found in 15 to 20% of the population. Now, according to many researchers, specifically Dr. Elaine Aron, whose words I quote, "This number is too many to be a disorder, but not enough to be well understood by those around you." Common traits of being highly sensitive include being easily overwhelmed and overstimulated when situations around you are too intense or chaotic for a long time. We often feel the need to withdraw into a quiet place just to recharge and recover from all that stimulation. We freak out internally when someone is observing us doing a task or when we have to compete to do it, and that's when our performance levels miserably dip. All said and done, that sounds like a perfectly messed up life to lead. But being highly sensitive comes with its own positive implications, and not just in the sense of the silver lining of a cloud. When you embrace your sensitivity and channel it towards things you care about, you can lead yourself to a very, very fulfilling life which will reap benefits for those around you. And get this, we sensitive people, if I do say so myself, possess exactly the qualities the world is starved of today. Allow me to explain. Merriam-Webster defines sensitivity in the sense that we're dealing with in two ways. One is the capacity of being easily hurt, and the other is awareness of the needs and emotions of others. That's the capacity of being easily hurt and awareness of the needs and emotions of others. These two definitions may seem conflicting at first, but ruminating a little bit will show you that they're very sensibly connected. I have the capacity of being easily hurt, not offended, but genuinely hurt. And I know exactly the situations where I struggle in, which means that if I were to see someone in a similar situation, I would be, quote, aware of their needs and emotions. People like me find ourselves spontaneously putting ourselves in other people's shoes. We find it easier to empathize because we're constantly relating their situations with our own. And here's the catch. More often than not, we know what we could do to help that situation. Based off of our own personal experience, we're able to figure out more or less what we do might help the situation or just make things worse. The tragedy is that this incredible power of sensitive people often just goes unnoticed. Society perceives them as weak or soft with little to contribute. And so because they are so stigmatized, they're not given the space they need to grow in their character and just be their amazing selves. While observing these attitudes, it's clear that there's something fundamentally wrong with the message that adults send kids about how they ought to respond to emotion. I once had a teacher in the first grade in a different school who, I remember, passingly referred to another little girl as that crybaby in front of the rest of the class when this particular girl wasn't there. Now, I took offense because I knew there was so much more to this friend of mine than what this teacher so shallowly saw, or rather, she didn't bother looking for it. Crybaby. Say the word to yourself, and it hurts. It's a term that makes me cringe even today. And that's just one of the common degrading refrains we've come up with. How often have you heard well-meaning adults tell boys not to cry like a woman, to grow up, toughen up, be a man, be a big kid? Why are you so sensitive? By God's providence, I had a place where I never had to hear any of those things. My home. My parents were always teaching me and my siblings that it was perfectly all right to cry if something hurt us, and that different things hurt different people. Tears were not a taboo here. And I think it's super important for every kid to have that space where they can enjoy their privilege of giving vent to their emotion without having judgment passed on them. Thanks to this mentoring, I came to a position where I learned that all those naysayers and their refrains were wrong. My life today is constantly molded and moving forward, not in spite of my sensitivity, but by virtue of it. My life is what it is and what it's going to be because of the sensitivity that God has placed in me. Whenever I see somebody else, for example, experiencing anxiety the way I know I do, a connection is immediately established. I conclude that Providence has placed us in the same position, and in spite of my shyness, I go and make friends with them. My conscience today will not let me rest until I have reached out to the person in need, because it's always reminding me what I would feel like if I were that person. And I made lasting friends because of the compassion my sensitivity gave rise to. Funny thing is, every person alive has this element of raw, unrefined sensitivity within them. Don't try denying it. I see it there. My appeal to you, wake it up. Allow it to be one of the fundamental instincts that guide you as a person. People need that. In our world today, we're constantly being trained to look out for ourselves and to stay self-protected. But can we challenge ourselves to let some of our emotions show through that shell? To be authentic when the world might perceive us as vulnerable. Know that the world doesn't need dry, unfeeling people who know exactly how to survive, but only for themselves. Beneath all its pretense, the world is screaming for tender-hearted people who will live for others as well. And know that when you take this path, you will be faced with difficulties. But also bear in mind that when you choose to do this, you are playing your part in challenging this mentality we've built up about sensitivity. You are breaking the stigma. So what's my answer to the question, why so sensitive? I'm sensitive because it's an inborn nature which I embrace. And I embrace it because I know sensitivity gives rise to compassion, and compassion makes the world go round. Don't take my word for it, take Mother Teresa's. Take the works of Florence Nightingale. Take the entire life of Jesus, and the answer is staring you right in the face. I assert today that my capacity to feel emotion is a precious, God-given gift, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Thank you.